How's it going, everyone? I'm Vigilance here with another video for you guys. In my previous Mod 23 tank video, I explained how to make a viable build using the new gear from the Dragon Hunts. This video will showcase to you my take on the best in slot build using what we currently have in Module 23. Maximizing your character without the use of an Augment companion, allowing for a better build with team support, while maintaining max survivability for your tank. But before we get started though, I wanted to take a second to highlight an important topic. I wanted to reach out to you all to help bring awareness to my channel's analytics for a second. As you can see in the pictures above, my channel and videos receive a ton of views, which is awesome, and I thank you all for that. Subs though tend to be a bit far and few between. Remember that it's free to subscribe. The more of you that do, the more of the community I can reach out to with my videos. If you have already subscribed to me, I thank you so much for your support. If not, consider joining me on my journey, and again, just remember, it's free, it costs nothing but the click of a button. Now that I've got my bit out of the way though, let's go ahead and get back to the main purpose of the video. So we're going to start off talking about gear. Well, everything that I currently have on my character is what I consider to be best in slot. Some of this stuff is going to be hard to obtain, other things pretty easy to obtain, but I'll go over how you get this stuff and what I'm using as we go through the video. Starting off, we have the Heavy Feywood Barbute. It's +1, but it doesn't have to be. This basically just gives it more item level if it's +1. I use this for the 7500 awareness when my health is above 50%. And the nice perk about it is if it does happen to drop below 50%, I get stamina regeneration. Usually at that point, you've been blocking for a while, so you're probably out of stamina anyway. So this will just help that out to give it that more regeneration property to get it back higher. And again, you'll get that awareness as soon as you get a heal from one of your healers in whatever content you're running. So that awareness will almost always be with you, except for when it might dip just, temporarily. Forest Guardian's Ward Scale Mail. This I use because it's 1500 awareness for each person in your team. And totaling that up in a full group, you'll have 7500 awareness because of this. This could be obtained from the Vault of Stars. You get the Crystalline Leaf at the final boss drop in the Vault of Stars, and you can go to the campaign store and buy this straight from there. The Rugged Gauntlets of the Dragon Hunter. These could be obtained from Dragon Hunts. It's a mythic gear piece, and basically, as it reads, you get 1% damage when struck, stacks up to 5 times, and when an enemy strikes you, that consumes that damage percentage, and it gives you damage resistance. So we want it for that 5% damage resistance. Feywood Carved Blade. I'm also going to highlight this one as well, the Feywood Buckler. I use these both. They're Mastercraft weapons from the Sharandar module that came out. These are good because they give 2% outgoing damage, damage resistance, and outgoing healing as well. And it can be shared amongst 5 different people in your team. So if you got 5 people running this, you're getting 10% in all those categories. Currently with my modifications, I'm using it for cleave, which I could switch to single target and do brazen slash. The other modification, I'm using forte for stats, and crit avoidance, which is going to be a big part of our build. Rugged Sabatons of the Dragon Hunter. These are also obtained from Dragon Hunts. They are really important to our build because they give us a lot of hit points whenever we're critically struck. Gives us 20% as a chance. It's 10% chance for that to happen, but it also gives us 3% defense, which actually brings us to our 90% that we're trying to reach for in this build. Tiamat's Golden Necklace. I decided to go with the Tiamat set. It could be either bought on the auction house or it could be achieved as a reward for completing the dungeon. I decided to go with this though because of the charisma bonus that you see listed, +6 charisma. This gives us a lot of stats and helps bring us up to that 90 in those 3 categories for defense, crit avoidance, and awareness. Not so much for the awareness, mainly just the defense and the crit avoidance, because as a fighter, that's part of our forte. The bonus that it gives, Draconic Resilience. We're not going to really see this all too often unless we're in a really heavy fight, something like Crown of Keldagon, where we go through all of our stamina. But when that does happen and we drop below 15%, we're going to get that nice 8% damage reduction, and we're also going to get that slight increase to crit avoidance. For the purposes of my build, I'm not including that 8% crit avoidance in as a part of the way to get my stats that I have for this. So that's just an added benefit, and it will help essentially when you don't have to block, because right now my build counts for a block. Ring of Darkness. This one's kind of optional. A lot of healers tend to run this as well sometimes, and other tanks. So if you're in a 10-man dungeon, you want to see who else might be running this ring. Ultimately, the reason for this is just mainly doing that debuff to the enemy, supporting the team, so to speak. And it just makes it so basically when you reduce their accuracy, they're not going to be hitting you as hard as if you're deflecting attacks. Not everybody has a high deflect, so it's not going to really affect your team as much, but this will help you since you'll still have a decent deflect by the end of this build. The Ring of Darkness can be obtained from the Vault of Stars, collecting the 4 required reagents that you can get from the hardcore version of the dungeon, and you make the ring at the very end after you defeat the final boss. Stalwart Needle of Ring of Celerity. This is going to be your threat generator for AoE content. It still can be useful in single target content, but just keep in mind this ring is literally just for threat generation. We do get some defensive stats, obviously. It comes from the Dragon Hunts, so if you want that, you're going to have to grind out some Dragon Hunts for it. This is Tiamat's Golden Sash. I use this as a part of the 3-piece set from the Mastered Tiamat dungeon. It gives us Strength and Constitution, as well as some incoming healing and deflection, but the Strength and Con, that gives us some extra damage for threat generation and overall damage support. Constitution, more hit points. Stack that up with the Constitution from the piece above earlier, and it's pretty much benefiting us in that major way. We're not really, again, taking too much from the set bonus on this, primarily using it for its item level and the stats that it gives. Valiant Dwarven Body Pattern. This, along with the pants that we're going to be going over in a second, are both found in Dragon Hunts. By getting all the reagents earned from the Dragon Hunts and purchasing it from the store directly. This one I decided to have give defense as a part of reaching my 90, and the action point gain is also helpful. The pants are going to give crit avoidance for me, and that's again to help me reach my 90. But I just wanted to showcase this for you as well. This also comes from the Dragon Hunts. Artifacts that I decided to go with, Black Dragon's Mark. It's a great debuff, 10% damage resistance reduced for an enemy. So essentially everybody gets 10% more damage versus that target. It also, from what I've been told, it stacks with the Black Dragon Heart. So if you get that artifact, you're still good to go with this one. It does give us a lot of crit avoidance and awareness, again, integral with our build, trying to get up to 90% across the board. And it gives us some extra hit points. Another very important one for my build is the Tiamat's Arcane Globe. Yes, it helps us complete our set bonus, but the Forte gives us defense and crit avoidance, again, for being a fighter, some awareness, and extra hit points, all supporting our 90%. This one's optional. The Mythallar Fragment. This is optional because it doesn't really give us anything towards our bonuses for the defensive categories. Now, something I noticed is that combined rating is actually different across all of these 1200 item level artifacts. For instance, if I go back to Tiamat's Arcane Globe, you'll see that it's 960. If I go up to the new one from the Dragon Hunts, this one's 960 as well. But if we go back to Mythallar, you'll see it's actually 864. Let's check out Demogorgon real quick. 1020. So you just gotta keep an eye on the combined rating. And again, combined rating is straight rating towards all your stats. So the lower you go on these ratings, the least amount of stats you're getting. And these are all the same item level, keep in mind. So just watch out for that combined rating. This one, I have it in here for the extra stamina regeneration, but it's not 100% necessary for the build. It can be swapped out with anything else that you have. It makes a good debuff artifact, so you can just swap its position with your active one if you need to. But at the same time, you can always put in another one into this category, or even put something else into the active and drop down the Black Dragon Mark, allowing for you to put in something else in its place as a passive. I decided to use Demogorgon's Reach, partially because of the combined rating that I was talking about earlier, but mainly because it gives us Forte, which is defense crit avoidance again, for those 90% that we were going for, and also for the power and hit points. Power helps damage, which helps threat, and hit points, overall survivability. So now we're going to take a look at our stats standing. These offensive stats are okay, in my opinion. They're not the greatest. We didn't really spec anything into it with the exception of our enhancements, which I'll get to in a little bit here. Our defensive stats are what we're actually looking at. This is just standing, mind you. 87.3 for defense. That'll go up by 3% from our boots. Awareness, which is at 66%. This actually goes up from a few things. We're going to be using 6,000 rating from our chest piece when in a full group. 5% awareness coming from Fizzy Brew, which is going to be our food buff. 15% awareness is going to come from our right block, our right bumper block. Dig in. And that's going to bring us actually over our 90%, but just slightly. Crit avoidance, we're going to be getting 7.5% from our companion enhancement. Whenever we swing on an enemy, that'll proc that. And then we also get a 10% bump to our crit avoidance as well from Unbreakable Shield Arm. It's a fighter class general bonus, which I'll show you a little bit later. Those two combined brings us to 90 as well. So again, in combat, you're most likely going to be getting these 90s across the board. Deflect and deflect severity, these were kind of our dump stats, if you want to consider those dump stats. They do actually become somewhat viable. If you decide that you want to go with your potion and your elixir to kind of help bump those up, deflect is going to get a nice bump. You get 5100 deflect potion rating, and then you get another 2000 from Full Hammer's elixir. You also get 6% from focused retaliation, which is a boon I'll show you a little bit later on. But if you get that to proc, it's 3 boon points and it's 2% per point, so that gives you 6. That also affects Full Hammer's elixir as well, going into deflect severity. So for deflect severity, you're going to get a 6% bump from the boon, plus the 5% Full Hammer elixir bump. So again, that's going to bump you up to what you're going to be seeing on the screen here. I decided to spec into Con and Charisma. The strength is only higher because of the Tiamat set that we're wearing. Constitution is giving us a lot of those hit points that we need, as well as some of this action point gain. Charisma is giving us that Forte, which is bonuses towards our defense and crit avoidance, as well as our recharge speed. Some other stats that typically get left out because they're not main stats. Stamina regeneration. Right now it's at 42%. Now you could boost this up by switching around some of your artifacts, but right now the ones I have set in there are kind of fixed with the exception of the Mythlar. The Mythlar is actually contributing 12% towards this, so it would even be lower than this. But 42% is where we currently stand with stamina regeneration. Again, this can be increased. Movement speed is actually on the high end. I'm actually using an enchantment that will give us 15% towards that. And we already have some other bonuses just for being a fighter alone. Tanks in general tend to move a little faster than DPS as well, just as a part of their class, so we can get to the combat and grab the aggro a little bit faster than everybody else. Action point gains a little bit on the higher end compared to recharge speed, but again, that's mainly because of our stats, the ability scores I just went over. Now that we're on enhancements, I decided to spec into garnets, which are going to give us power per enchantment. That's just straight damage, goes straight towards getting our threat generation and things of that nature. And then for our defensive side, I spec'd entirely into Jade enchantments, which gives that crit avoidance that we need. And again, you'll see when we go back to stats real quick, crit avoidance is at 76,000 and our power is at 78,000, which aren't even near the caps. I mean, they're close, but they're not going to be in danger of going over, even if we use our food buffs. For the utility slot, I decided to go with Garnet enchantment. This is just giving us, again, some extra defense and crit avoidance by having this slotted in here. Overloads, I decided to go with Unholy Protection for the extra 5% crit avoidance and 5% deflect chance. Deflect, again, just being kind of a partial perk. We're really using this for the crit avoidance. Resiliency of the Depths is what I decided to go with as a secondary option, but there are other ones. You can go with 5% hit points, you can go with 5% action point gain. There's all sorts of other options out there for the overload slots. This is just what I'm currently using. As a part of team support for this build, I decided to use Flash Freeze. We don't actually need Fortified Nature to give us any stats whatsoever. And normally it would just be Deflect and Awareness that gets the bump because the defense is currently bugged on it. So for Flash Freeze, as it describes here, you get 5% reduced outgoing damage to the target. So basically the target is going to be hit with 15% because it stacks 3 times, lasts 5 seconds. And so he'll be hitting you and your allies for 15% less, assuming that it actually does what it says it does. So that's one of the first features I'm going to talk about here as far as team support goes. And then, as I mentioned earlier, movement bonus for this is just giving us that 15% bump to our speed, which helps us get to the target first and grab that threat. Something else I didn't mention as well, we have over in the potion tray at the bottom there, we have the chain of scales. This gives us a 3% bump to our awareness when it's active. It also gives a random perk, usually stamina regen, deflect severity, power, crit avoidance, usually some sort of a defensive buff. I think power is one of the few that it actually gives for offensive buffs. And those extra buffs is only increased by 2%. The awareness is the big portion of why we use the chain of scales, because we're factoring in that extra 3%. I also have the mechanical dragon there on the left side. That's just giving us some defensive, offensive bonuses towards fighting dragons, but again, not 100% necessary. An optional thing you can use is Lyra's Bell of Celerity. Increases your companion's recharge speed by 20%. This is going to make it so that your lion, in my case for this build, is going to be able to use his roar, which gives outgoing damage to your team, so it definitely is worth using if you're not going to use the dragon. So next I wanted to talk about powers. Cleave is going to be your main RT ability, which is going to be going for groups of adds. Threatening Rush is going to be your left trigger. This will help you kind of lunge around, hitting targets that are a little bit further away, while also increasing your threat generation. In the circumstance of using single target, Brazen Slash is going to be your go-to because it gives you stamina regeneration and also hits for 100 magnitude per strike. For encounter powers, I decided to go with Enforced Threat as my main, which is going to be your threat generation when someone's about to steal it, or if they have stolen it, this will place you on the top. It also reduces the awareness of all the enemies that you're fighting by 10% as long as they're inside that 30-foot radius. This is great because it helps your DPS hit harder. Linebreaker is another really good one to use, especially in AoE circumstances. For each enemy that's hit, you do an increased threat hit for them, and it's hitting for that 200 magnitude. The only exception is this is an arc attack, so you kind of got to get yourself in a position where you can hit multiple enemies. It's not going to be something like a radius attack, kind of like Enforced Threat. Shield Throw, this is great for single target, but also usable in AoE as well. We have the cooldown down to 5.6 seconds, so it comes back relatively fast. It does an increased threat hit, and it hits for 325 magnitude. This is really, really important for single target. An optional power that you can use for single target would be Bull Charge. Just a strong 520 hit, but it also increases your cleave damage, so if you're worried about adds in a single target fight, this will help you with that threat generation. You could use Anvil of Doom as well in a single target situation. If you pair this with Anvil of Challenge, it's a class feature down below, it will place you on the top of the threat list as well, so you can kind of alter between Anvil of Doom and Enforced Threat. This one's definitely worth mentioning, Knight's Valor. In most single target fights, you're going to be just across your DPS within a pretty close distance. This has a 25-foot radius though. So you'll tether to somebody and you'll start generating whatever threat they are generating towards yours. And yes, it lasts for 10 seconds, but the cooldown is pretty long on this one, so I wouldn't depend on it entirely for holding aggro, but it can be very useful. Since we're going for a survivability build, max survivability, I recommend Second Wind. This gives you another 20% extra hit points restored when you use it, and it's hit points by that same amount. You recover a portion of damage dealt by any attack that's really hitting you. So, as an example, Crown of Keldagon, the tick damage from the bleeds when the dragon claws at you or bites you, those tick damages are each one restoring a portion of the hit points that they're taking away from you. This makes it super easy on your healer, and I highly recommend this. If you're going to go for something that gives you more stats, which in this build you won't need, you probably want to use Bladed Rampart as long as you got the feat that's giving you the extra 30% defense and awareness. If you don't have the feat, it just gives you the defense, and again, we don't need this for this build. The reflect damage is actually nice though, coming from this power. Earthshaker is going to be your main AoE threat grab, or in this case, just threat generation, dealing damage of 1050 magnitude to everybody around you within that 20-foot radius. Later on, and if you're ever going to be in an instance where you're trying to give team support for damage reduction, Phalanx is going to be your go-to. This gives 20% damage reduction to everybody. Really useful in dungeons like Lair the Mad Mage at the very final boss when everybody needs that extra defensive boost to keep them from being one-shot from Trobriand. You can also use this in like Tower of the Mad Mage during hypos, or just any dungeon that has hypo mechanics in general. This will help reduce some of that damage and save your cleric or your paladin, your bard, whoever's healing, your warlock, that extra outgoing healing amount, because they're not going to have to throw out as many heals. Mechanics are pretty simple. You got your left joystick click as a block. That's for 40% of your max hit points. Then you have your dig in, which is for 60% of your hit points. Dig in gives you also 15% awareness, and it still actually procs the crit avoidance as well because it's considered a block. It's actually better than the standard block because the standard block only gives you the crit avoidance when you block with it. So I definitely recommend using dig in as your main block for these circumstances. You'll want to use your main block as a way of being able to move and block at the same time to kind of position yourself more tactically if you don't want to take a hit. Retaliate. This is basically whenever you dig in, you get hit. So Retaliate's going to be a good way of getting extra threat generated. The damage increases based on your remaining stamina being lower. So if you hold down Retaliate, you're taking a bunch of damage and you pop off, the Retaliate hit, it's going to do 800 magnitude. If it's higher stamina, it's going to be anywhere between 5 to 800. Path of the Vanguard just says that basically we get increased threat generation, nothing special there. Forte, a big part of our build is actually built on our charisma, which is giving us extra forte. So defense and crit avoidance are the two main stats that we're taking out of this, and that's helping us towards reaching our 90s on the top 3 stats, which again, defense, crit avoidance, and awareness. Vigorous Strikes. This one's kind of a touchy one to talk about because some people say it's not worth running since you typically do use your block and your stamina while you're blocking, bringing this effectiveness down each time that you're struck. But if you keep in mind, you got stamina regeneration and the fact that you don't always really dip too low on your stamina when you're blocking because you're also attacking. I like this because of the 10% extra crit strike that you get. Now, yes, it's not always going to be 10%, but for the most part, it's going to be on the high end of it whenever you are actually in content. The only circumstances would be in those few dungeons that you do reduce your stamina by a lot. And like I already mentioned, some of those were like Crown of Keldagon and Tower of the Mad Mage, things like that, where you take a big hit and a lot of your stamina is gone. Steel Recovery. This can really help out in some of those harder dungeons that take away a lot of your stamina. Every time you use an encounter power, you restore 5% of your stamina. With shield throw being every 5 seconds roughly, you're getting that 5% stamina, a lot faster than a lot of other tanks out there. So definitely worth using. There are some other optional ones that you can use, like Combat Superiority. This one, whenever you're using a counter, which again, every 5 seconds with shield throw, it's going to increase your at-will damage by 10%, helping you keep that aggro and establish more aggro. You could also go with Greater Endurance for more movement speed, shield talent. I don't like it though, it only gives a very minuscule amount of stamina regen. Nothing really worth using in my opinion. Ferocious Reaction, every time you're struck, you deal magnitude 25 damage back to your attacker as long as it's a deflected attack. So that could be also useful, again, helping you with aggro. Anvil of Challenge is the circumstantial one I was talking about earlier. This one is going to place you on the top of the threat list when you use Anvil of Doom. Feats. Shield Thrower. I decided to go with this because not only does it reduce its cooldown, but it also gives it that extra threat generation and that reduced cooldown that it allows you to pop it off every 6 seconds. Ours is about 5 seconds with our recharge speed, so definitely worth using. Cleaving Bull, while not always on, when you do use Bull Charge, it'll give you the ability to get that extra damage by 40 magnitude for the 6 seconds whenever you're using an attack that strikes multiple enemies. I've tested this out and it only actually affects your at will, so when you use Cleave, you'll be able to get that extra 40 magnitude. Critical Deflection, I decided to go with this over Combat Balance because Combat Balance goes off of your crit avoidance and deflect rating and your awareness all being equal. Since our deflect is actually really low, that's not going to work well for us. Critical Deflection, however, goes off of your crit strike and your deflect rating. So since we're not speccing into either of those, they're actually pretty close. They're both in the 40s. Whenever we deflect an attack, we're getting that bump of 10 stamina. Sharpened Senses. We don't use Bladed Rampart at the moment, but we also don't use Determination either. So Sharpened Senses, if we decide that we want to use Bladed Rampart for any reason, we don't have to use our block, and we'll still hit our 90 with this. So it fills in the gaps for that temporary amount of time. I believe it's 10 seconds. Yeah, 10 seconds. Shake It Off. So I decided to go with this because Retaliate is one of our main threat generators. You know, if you're popping it every time it comes up that you're able to, you're getting that extra hit out there, and if your stamina happens to be lower, you're getting that extra damage based on this feat right here. Now, since this is a survivability video, I am going to mention that deep breathing is a really good one for survivability. The only reason I don't like this feat very much is that you have to stand still with your dig-in for a long time. Every 3 seconds, it's going to give you a stack of this, and it can only stack 3 times. So you have to stand still for 9 seconds to get the full bonus of this. That's a long time that you're not moving around, getting threat from everybody around you, threat on the boss, things like that. It does give you increased damage by quite a bit, as well as healing received, but just remember that you're going to be standing still for a while to get this bonus. In addition to being a fighter, a reminder that you get that crit avoidance while blocking, unshakable shield arm, just listed down in the general section. You also get 10% movement speed while out of combat, and it increases your combat advantage damage whenever your stamina is full, and that decreases as your stamina decreases. Boons, I'm not really going to highlight too much on Boons. You can pause the video and see what I have here listed if you wanted to copy paste. But basically, Boons right now, they actually max out at 91. I'm pretty close to getting the last point. It's from the current Dragon Hunts with Module 23. Ones I do want to highlight on are going to be the Tier 5 and the Master Boons. I decided to go with Second Wind because it gives extra stamina regeneration, which is always important for tanks, especially in a survival case. Masterclass for the extra Forte, which gives us, again, more defense and crit avoidance. And then as our Master Boon, I decided to take Focus Retaliation for the extra, mainly the 6% stats. So you have Control Resistance, Deflect, and Deflect Severity. Whenever this procs, you're getting 6% across all of those. Stronghold Boons are going to be a very minor part of my build. Again, I don't have a lot unlocked. So we have Power, which does help with our damage and our threat generation. Again, these aren't maxed out either. Incoming healing bonus, while important for a tank also, there's other ways that you can get stuff like stats. If you had it, I would recommend Deflect Severity. Actually, they don't have Deflect Severity. If you had it and you needed it, you could go Defense, or you can go something like Deflect, or max hit points increased. Incoming healing will help as well, but it wouldn't have been my first choice if I had other things unlocked. Awareness is unlocked on my build, but it's very low because of our structure level, so I decided not to go with it. For utility, movement speed is a huge plus, but in content where it's like very hard dungeons, Tiamat Master, or going into like Tom or Zariel, any of those dungeons, Revive Sickness is going to be your go-to for sure. In case you go down, you don't want to have that debuff against you as long as you do, and it reduces how long you'll have that stack. So with companions, basically the biggest things I wanted to go over were companion bonuses, the equipment I'm using, the enhancements, the summoned companion I decided to go with, and some optional ones. I decided not to go with an augment companion because augment companions just benefit you and the stats that you have. We were able to hit 90 across the board on defense, crit avoidance, and awareness without the use of an augment companion. So this opened up the ability to give support companions a try, and I think the best one, in my opinion, is the Golden Lion. When you look down at the Golden Lion's bonuses, you'll see Arulent Coalition. This intercepts 10% damage from anybody that's standing within 5 feet of the Lion. So this is, in my opinion, a team support, because if your team is stacked up for hypos, as an example, that Lion, if he happens to be close by, will take 10% of that damage. Not just from one person, but from all allies. Really useful there for survivability reasons. The Aurulent Roar. This gives everybody 2 stacks of Radiant Weapon, and that's for 4% overall additional damage over 12 seconds. And if you notice, the cooldown says 15 seconds. That's 3 seconds of downtime that you don't have this buff. Now, if you use the Bell of Celerity that I was talking about earlier, and reduces the cooldown by 20% for 30 seconds. So for 2 rotations of this, it reduces it by 20%, so that's 1.5 twice is 3 seconds, bringing it down to 12, which is the exact amount of time that his buff is active for. So for 2 of his rotations, you will have 100% uptime on his roar. Companion equipment. You have defense and awareness as the 1400 item level tarnished amber necklace of the companion. I'm running 3 of these. These are integral in the properties of giving us defense and awareness and helping us to get to that 90%. Obviously, we have the companion enhancement. This is the only thing that can be slotted here. And for our enhancement, I decided to go with the 7.5% crit avoidance. This was 100% necessary to get us to the 90% that we have. If you wanted to take a small dip and get rid of this and go underneath that 90%, you could run something like armor break or weapon break, things that are going to help out your team even more. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to fit that into my build with getting the 90% on those 3 top stats. But if you wanted to take that small hit, which isn't going to really affect you too much, you could go with another team support option here. Companion bonuses. As you see here, I've got Bony Wisdom, which is a skeleton. I've got the Cunning Mimic, which gives us the Forte and the awareness. We have the Myconid's Presence. This one's an expensive companion right now. Very hard to get. Crit avoidance and awareness. You have Brunor for the awareness and defense here as well. There is other options for that same bonus as well. I believe the dog gives it. And then we have the Golden Deep Crow, which gives 7.5% awareness. Now with these bonuses, if you wanted to go again with a more team support kind of bonus, you could use the Raptor and help use with everybody else's Raptors, give that bonus towards getting 19% power across 5 different people, yourself included. If we were to switch out something, I would probably switch out the crit avoidance and the awareness. Yes, it would drop us down below our 90%. Our awareness is slightly overprocced from 90. I believe it's 93%. So we wouldn't lose a lot there, but the crit avoidance would go down by that 3.8%. Now you would be gaining 19% power as a result of that, and you'd be giving the ability for everybody else to have that higher power as well. So if we're sticking with that team support option, using a Raptor would give us that ability to do so even further. Some optional companions I wanted to go over with you guys. If you decided you wanted to go with more team support options that weren't the Lion. If we decided we wanted to use Dritz, Dritz gives that increased outgoing damage by 3% to all allies in his area. If we decided to go with Brunor, he gives reduced incoming damage to all allies by 3%. So instead of helping damage, you're helping survivability with this one. If you decided to go with the tutor is going to give everybody in your team, all 5 players, the bonus of 5% combat advantage with the class in session feature. Now, my dedicated squire is only legendary, but if you decided you wanted to use the dedicated squire, he actually gives heals to help support your team. Every time that he uses his smite ability, anybody nearby will get a heal over time for 4 seconds. If you decided that you wanted to use the Intellect Devourer, he'll do a massive blast in a cone-shaped attack, and he'll hit all of your foes that are in that blast and hold them for 2 seconds. This actually feels a lot longer than 2 seconds for some reason, but every time that he does that attack, it's going to be more of a control support option, not so much a damage support. It doesn't really hit the hardest, it just happens to strike a lot of people when he uses it. In the case of using a damage support companion, Regis is really good because he gives everybody 3% recharge speed. I don't believe this stacks if you have multiple versions of him out, so if someone else is running him out, they'll get the same bonus. But if nobody's running him, you'll get that. On top of the fact that he does his Whirlwind of Blades attack, it's really good for AoE combat. He'll be able to hit everything within a 30-foot radius. He almost always starts off combat with this too, as long as he had time to get his cooldown in between fights. In the instance of having a single target fight, Pseudo Dragon can be a really good damage support companion as well. While he doesn't give your team specifically support options, he does give a lot of single target damage, which could help the fight go through a lot faster. Specifically his Poison Sting, this is his major damaging attack. It cools down with 8 seconds, so he's constantly letting this puppy off, and it does a lot of damage, along with the damage over time. Next, we're going to look at mounts and the different types of bonuses that you get from mounts. So we're actually going to start off with the top mount here. As you can see, we're using a lot of fortitude. We're also using some dominance as well for our insignia bonuses across the board. With the collars, you can see here, we have 5% increased crit severity, just helps with our offensive stats. I'm currently using 4% encounter power damage. I'd probably actually be using it at will if I had it, but again, I don't. So I'm just using what I have. Movement speed bonus, this is really helpful again, helps you get to the fight faster. Stamina gain bonus, 4% there. Rough Astral Diamonds, I prefer that over gold. It doesn't matter which mounts you have in your stable, per se, as long as you have ones that give you the ability to have your insignia bonuses, which is the next topic we're going to cover. The insignia bonuses I chose to go with were Gladiator's Guile ×2. Whenever you use an insignia bonus twice, the second time you use it, it gives you half again as much as you normally got. So when you see Gladiator's Guile on the bottom right there, it says whenever your stamina is above 75%, you move 10% faster, and when your stamina is lower than 25%, you gain 10% stamina regeneration. Basically, we move 15% faster with having two options, and we get our stamina back 15% faster as well. Artificer's Persuasion. I like this one because if my cooldowns are still in the process of being reduced, I could pop my artifact and it will give me that extra 2 seconds closer towards getting my encounter powers back, which, as you guys know, tanks, that's our meat and potatoes of holding threat, right, is mainly our encounter powers. So if we want to get those back quicker, this is an option for that. Magistrate's Patience. I can't stress the importance of this one enough. If we're talking about availability for team support options, and useful ones at that, Magistrate's Patience gives not only you a buff to your crit avoidance, which we can factor in. It's not currently factored into the 90s that we have, but this will help you when you're not blocking, that 2500 crit avoidance. But you also give all 4 of your other teammates 2500 defense for 5 seconds. That's a 50% uptime because it can happen every 10 seconds. This is whenever you receive damage from a critical strike, which is pretty often. So this is a great team support bonus for your insignia bonuses to keep in mind. And we have Cavalry's Warning. Whenever you activate a mount power, you're getting 2000 rating to all of your stats. This isn't factored into our 90%, so really this is just helping our deflect and deflect severity, as well as all of our offensive stats. That's the main reason I run this, is just for the offensive stat bump. Whenever you use that extra, mount power, you're going to get some extra damage outgoing, and you're going to hold threat that much better. Next, I wanted to go over what I'm using for combat powers and equip powers for mounts. Magnificent Inspiration, this is the Pegasus. By far the best AoE, tank, debuff, even mount that you can use. You're getting 15% Forte and an additional one of the following for the class. So as a tank, we're getting 15% damage resistance. This is huge. And then we also get 3000 magnitude hit to everybody around us. And that bonus lasts for 10 seconds. That's awesome. And then again, for team support, being for the equip power as well, we have Runicar, which gives everybody 2250 power and defense. And this again is to every single person in your group. So you're giving them extra damage and you're giving them extra survivability. Some other options that you can use for debuffs and with your mounts, you have the Bat Swarm. As you can see, that gives everybody increased damage, slows the target, extra incoming damage to the target, reduces his outgoing damage, and reduces his critical avoidance. Another one you can use is Eclipsed Armament from the Eclipsed Lion. He gives increased outgoing damage to the target by 15% and decreases his outgoing damage from the target by 15% as well. You could also go with the T-Rex, increases his incoming damage by 15%. It does root enemies, so if there are adds, it'll stop them for about 6-second duration. And it's also useful because it can also consume a single enemy as well, but it typically has to be of a minion quality, which is the single dot enemies. While not considered a debuff to, per se, the damage incoming to a target or the amount of damage we deal to the target, it does give a nice reduced amount of damage that the target deals to us by 15%. So I recommend the Griffin for this purpose. It also does a stun to everybody in the area, so if there are adds, it can help with that as well. And then it gives you the increased charisma, intelligence, and wisdom. And while we don't need the increased intelligence and wisdom, the charisma bump helps again with some stats. So it'll give you that much more defense, that much more crit avoidance in this case. The Golden Lion, Aerial Armament. This will give everybody a nice chunk of shield, especially if they're close by when the lion lets off his roar. I have seen this glitch and actually not activate even though the cooldown starts for it. So just be careful of that. What's kind of nice about this too is that if your allies don't get struck and they had that shield, it's not wasted because it becomes radiant weapon stacks, and it gives you up to 3 stacks of that, which will combine with the 2 that your lion companion is already giving you. So each stack of radiant weapon gives you 2% damage. So if you're getting, let's say, that plus the 2% from your companion, you're getting an additional 10% damage to all your allies. Divine Intervention, also known as the Wings. This one's not necessarily a debuff, but it's very strong in the sense of an AoE hit. It has a very wide arc, and it hits everything that you can pretty much see in front of you. This is great for grabbing enemies' threat before any of your allies get a chance to strike them. Or if your allies are getting overwhelmed, for instance, in the Vault of Stars, if you're running the maze and you got all those enemies just appearing out of nowhere and they start overwhelming your allies, you can pop this Divine Intervention and it'll knock all of them back. Nice strong hit, and plus it does extra damage versus devils, demons, and fiends. Unfortunately for the equip powers, there's not a lot of extra team support options. Runic Aura is one of the very few. Something I could recommend for you if you're trying to go with more survivability, you can go with the extra hit points from Stalwart. You can also go with Deflection, being the 4500 rating. This will help you get that deflect up a little bit more. So far, what exactly do we give in the sense of team support? Well, we give 2% outgoing damage reduction, damage, and outgoing healing with our Mastercraft Fey weapon set that we have. We give out 4% extra damage with the Golden Lion because of the radiant weapon that he gives with his roar. 10% damage reduction if an ally is standing near the lion. Again, they'll share their damage with the lion just from being in his general vicinity. 15% damage reduction from Flash Freeze, the enchantment that we have when fully procced. Stacks up to 3 times, and it's really easy to proc again. You just have to be attacking your enemy for that. We give an additional 2250 rating for power, for Runic Aura, and for defense. We get an additional 2500 defense from Magistrate's Patience, and that's towards every single person. That's our Insignia bonus. And then an optional that I mentioned earlier, if we decided when we wanted to give that 20% damage reduction from our daily ability, Phalanx, that is something else that you can factor into this build as well. That's going to wrap up my video though. As I mentioned before, smash that like button if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to follow me in more future content. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below, and even give me a critique and let me know how I'm doing. We'll see you guys in the next video. Have a great day.